This meeting is being recorded.
Well, welcome, disciples. I'm so pleased to gather with you today and some friends from our Riverwalk cluster in Northeast Mid-America region. And this is our gift to you. If we can claim Patricia Farmer's insight and leadership, as she will be our presenter of a theology of beauty for troubled times. We're recording this during Lent to present to you, and a lot of times we think of Lent as the season of shadow and of absence of light, of introspection, of pondering our mortality, our sin. And this may seem quite the opposite, as we have soft light and claiming the beauty that is also part of the season. So Patricia, I invite you to do some introduction of yourself and then share with us. And we are grateful for everyone to be here today.
Oh, it's so good to be with you. I am the pastor of Millersburg Christian Church near Fulton, Missouri. And it's just great to be with you during this Lenten season and to share with you this presentation called Beauty for Troubled Times. I want to begin today with a poem by one of my favorite poets, Rainer Maria Rilke. It's called Go to the Limits of Your Longing. It's translated from the German by Joanna Macy. God speaks to us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. And that is from the Book of Hours, number 1. Well, we do live in troubled times. I don't have to tell you that. Of course, all times are troubled in one way or another, but this time in history is different. Not only are we witnessing threats to democracy at home and around the world, the war in Ukraine, the rise of white supremacy and Chinese balloons. I mean, there is an ever-looming issue of climate change, which means we are facing the existential threat to our very species. So anxiety is on the rise, and many thoughtful people are afraid or teetering on despair. We are worried for the generations after ours. Well, how can beauty help? How can it be not only a balm, but a source of hope for our planet? And that's what I want to explore today, especially the beauty that philosopher Alfred North Whitehead talks about, beauty with a capital B. This kind of large and expansive beauty is a refuge, a spiritual companion, a source of hope, and transformation toward a more sustainable way of living. And since this is a theology of beauty, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on my theology, which is process theology. I studied Whitehead and Hartshorne, the two most famous philosophers, back in graduate school. And the reason for this is that after graduating from a Baptist seminary in 1982, I had become an agnostic, primarily because of the problem of evil and suffering. So I went to graduate school in philosophy at MU here in Columbia, Missouri. And there I was introduced to the philosophical writings of Whitehead, Hartshorne, along with process theologian John Cobb and others. And it was through my study of process theology and philosophy that I was brought back into the Christian fold with a fresh understanding of a God of love, a beautiful God. And I became ordained in the Christian church, disciples of Christ, and entered the ministry. And I also introduced my husband, Ron Farmer. He's the minister at Oakland Christian Church, to process theology. And he ended up writing a major scholarly book on process hermeneutics with Mercer Press. And most recently, he wrote a real short summary of his book on Energian Press. And he presented his work at the Center for Process Studies at Claremont School of Theology in California in the late 90s. And we were able then to meet these wonderful scholars that we had been studying, John Cobb, Marjorie Suhaki, David Griffin, and others. And after serving a church in Ohio, we were co-ministers there. Ron and I then moved to California, where Ron was the dean of the chapel at Chapman University. It wasn't too far from Claremont, so we became part of the Process and Faith program. And you can find out more about Process and Faith at their website, processandfaith.org. It's really a great website, and you can find a lot of information there. And I've particularly been drawn to Whitehead's view of beauty. And in the early 2000s, while serving a church in California, I began writing with this special focus on beauty, beginning with the book Embracing a Beautiful God in 2003 with Chalice Press, and then wrote some other books. And then my last book on beauty and process theology was in 2021 during COVID, which summarizes what I've learned over the years in a very little book with Energion Press. And so since COVID, I've been thinking about how beauty and process can help us in these troubled times. As fears rise and hopes are often dashed, well, on a spiritual level, beauty can help us hold everything gently, including our fears and our longings, and integrate them into a larger harmony of harmonies. That is, we cannot just pretend that we are not afraid, but when we open ourselves to the spaciousness of beauty, we develop the capacity to care for our fears without letting them control us. It also reminds me of the poem I just read by Rilke, Let Everything Happen to You, Beauty and Terror. Because in this way, terror is not left to its own devices, but is included in beauty's large embrace. Beauty transforms us, and it gives us a glimpse of eternity, which is immensely hopeful. And I want to address that sense of beauty and terror today, and how an aesthetic approach to life can help us integrate and transform our often fluctuating experiences of hope and despair into a larger harmony. Historian Howard Zinn says, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. And so I believe that we must include beauty as something we emphasize if we are to find hope and consolation in these troubled times. And in one of my essays on process theology, I talk about what I call spirit bathing, which is to metaphorically go out and just bathe ourselves in beauty. And when we do, we wash off the dirt and toxicity of this world and remember the sacred aspects that are always with us. We can go spirit bathing in the trees. The Japanese call this forest bathing. Or we can go to an art museum or delve into our favorite poem or go to a concert. Or as Paul Koch, last time I presented this, he talked about getting up before sunrise and watching the sunrise slowly and meditatively. And wow, that's another form of spirit bathing. We all need to take some beauty breaks, and especially during the busy Lenten season, to bathe in beauty and just restore our own souls. Now, what do I mean by beauty? I mean, that is from the viewpoint of process theology. Well, I'd like to share some slides from the Cobb Institute Educational Toolbox. This is online. You can find this at the Cobb Institute. These are thoughts summarized from my little book, Beauty and Process Theology. And I organized this into 8 points, 8 different facets of this luminous gem called beauty. Now, the first 2 facets are about God and beauty. And then I will talk about forms of beauty. And finally, we'll talk about beauty and hope. So let's begin with the dream of beauty. Whitehead says, the teleology of the universe is directed toward the production of beauty. In other words, beauty is God's dream for the world, the guiding lure in every moment of becoming. God lures diverse elements toward rich and complex forms of well-being. Beauty, if we define it in process terms, is a combination of harmony and intensity, or intense harmony. So keep those 2 words, intense harmony, in mind as we continue today. Not just intensity, which can often be chaotic in itself, and not just harmony, which can be static and even exclusionary in itself, but intense harmony. That is a rich, open harmony filled with contrasts, like a Mozart symphony or a jazz improvisation. The poet of the world. In human life, God's beauty is not found in the dazzling garments of a scepter-wielding king, but in love, gentleness, playfulness, and wonder. Whitehead says that God is the poet of the world. Isn't that beautiful? God is the poet of the world. Just as poets invite us into their world, not through force, but through persuasion, so God lovingly beckons us toward intense harmony through attraction, not coercion. Now, here we'll get into the forms of beauty. Begin with artistic beauty. Some of you may be musicians or painters or poets. So musicians, painters, dancers, and creative artists of all kinds intuitively understand how Whitehead's idea of intense harmony creates the most lasting emotional, spiritual experience. Works of art at their best evoke goodness, beauty, and truth across a spectrum of feeling. In my writings, I often use Van Gogh as a guiding light here. And he says, he wrote to his brother Theo, to know God is to love many things. To know God is to love many things. And that he had such a beautiful soul, Van Gogh. And so that takes us into the realm of soul beauty. What is the soul? Well, the soul is not a static, isolated, enclosed part of our being, but rather a river of experiences, saturated with divinity and reflecting all creation. A beautiful soul is adaptable, renewing, changing, and flowing toward a wider sea of enriching fullness. I often refer to this as the, quote, fat soul in my books and written work. And that is a soul that is plump with everything it can take in and still retain its integrity in the tradition of this comes from the tradition of Bernard Loomer, an important process theologian. A wide and welcoming soul, or a fat soul, is never static, but refreshingly alive to the infinite web of relationships that ground it in the world. Now we're going to turn to tragic beauty. Whitehead says, the adventure of the universe starts with a dream and reaps tragic beauty. Tragic beauty can arise out of the worst of circumstances, much like the resurrection of Jesus. I use that as an example because Marjorie Suchocki, the great process theologian, often used the term resurrection possibilities. And I love that as we approach Easter, resurrection possibilities. God's power is not unilateral, magical power that can wipe out a virus in an instant or stop a bullet or an earthquake. Rather, God's power in the world is relational power, shared power. It is the power of love. And as Thomas Ord reminds us, it is the power of uncontrolling love. For God is, according to Whitehead, the great companion, the fellow sufferer who understands. And there we see the cross, the great companion, the fellow sufferer who understands. Moral beauty. Justice and compassion are forms of beauty. They establish bonds of rich connection that are loving, fair, respectful, and inclusive. The word fair is actually related to the word beauty. You think of the fair meadow or the fair city or the fair maiden. So justice and beauty are deeply connected. Now, moral beauty often begins with dreams for a better world, as in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. But the beauty is not complete until embodied in the richness of concrete relations. Moral beauty includes a wide embrace of all colors, literally all skin colors, as well as the vibrant colors of cultural, religious, and ideological differences within a larger harmony of harmonies. Natural beauty. This, of course, is the mother of all beauty. The hills and the rivers, the trees and stars are all forms of natural beauty. The beauty lies in what they are and how they express themselves, and also in their contrasts with one another. As the universe reveals, beauty is harmony, but harmony is not sameness. Harmony thrives on diversity. As a process theologian, I believe God is deeply present within all creation, but is more than creation, which is a term that's also known as panentheism. In the blooming and dying, we witness on a larger scale the perpetual perishing of every experienced moment as new moments arise, or as the James Webb photos remind us, the death of stars and the birth of stars continues. The pathos in nature heightens our awareness of beauty. Nature for me has expanded enormously with the James Webb photos, reminding me that we are part of something much larger than our Earth. And oh, isn't it ravishing? Pictured here is the phantom galaxy. It seems to be quoting Whitehead. The teleology of the universe is directed toward the production of beauty. Yes, these photos can help us fall in love with creation, which may be beauty's greatest gift, especially in these times. For as the amazing Hildegard of Bingen, my favorite mystic, said in the 12th century, we shall awaken from our dullness and rise vigorously toward justice. If we fall in love with creation, deeper and deeper, we will respond to its endangerment with passion. Wow, talk about a woman before her time. This statement is more relevant today than even in the 12th century. Finally, beauty and hope. Process theology says we are not locked into the past or in any predetermined outcome for the future. The flow from the past to the creative present means that each moment infused with divinity begins anew. This process is the source of freshness, creativity, and zest. We are called to work with God to bring forth beauty. Resilience is required, but despair need not apply. Process theology is a theology of hope. And now that I've given you an overview of beauty and process thought, let me expand on the bit on tragic beauty and hope, which is our theme for today. I think we are all familiar with the Japanese art of repairing broken vessels with gold, kintsugi, which literally means to join with gold. And this, I think, is a good picture of the Whiteheadian notion of tragic beauty, which carries with it this transformational aspect. Beauty in this Whiteheadian sense often includes melancholy and longing, as we saw in Rilke's poem. Now think of the cherry blossom, or music that taps into your deepest longings. In process thought, the very notion of beauty often includes sadness. Whitehead calls it perpetual perishing, and the Japanese call it mono no aware, the pathos of things. That is, the ephemeral, fragile nature of the cherry blossom in spring adds to the experience of its preciousness. Beauty in a Whiteheadian sense carries this idea of creative contrasts, the holding together of sadness and gladness, the beauty and the terror, and a larger harmony of harmonies. That's why I like to preach about fattening up our souls, expanding them to include such contrasting elements. And this is part of soul beauty, the ability to open ourselves to the beauty and the terror, and so allow for the creative contrast which make for a full life. Van Gogh's works often feature vivid, stark contrasts of primary colors. He believed the one color could change the way we see the contrasting colors. They complement each other and they give us a larger experience. His works, like Starry Night, carry the sense of movement, like the universe, like process theology. Van Gogh believed in transforming his pain through art, and that God was a part of the process. So, like Van Gogh, we take our pain and our sorrow and we spin it into beauty through either our own creative process or through immersing ourselves in the beauty that others create. This is creative transformation at work in the aesthetic realm. Now, a part of that ultimate transformation comes in heavenly packages. Now, this subject of heaven is something we often shy away from, and for good reasons. We don't want to diminish the importance of this world for another reality. Ironically, though, many people who have had near-death experiences, that is NDEs, they return completely different, more loving and compassionate, and with a new vigor to help save the planet. They experience both love and beauty with such intensity that some even describe new colors that we cannot perceive in this reality. Can you just imagine colors that we have never seen before? Beauty is tied up with love and many of these NDEs. And from my work in Whitehead, I think love is the highest form of beauty. That is, love is the most important form of intense harmony. So this linking of the two together makes sense to me. Now, we don't want to have to die and return to have the same infusion of inspiration, but we can learn from NDEs just as we do from the ecstatic visions of the mystics, such as Julian of Norwich and Hildegard of Bingen. Hildegard's music alone can transport us to heavenly places. Now, for those mystics and NDEers who have had these uniquely direct experiences with holy reality, in one way or another, we see resonances of the wisdom that process theology teaches. That is, that God is love. 1 John 4:8, God is love. And we are all deeply interconnected. We are here to work with God as co-creators to make the world a better place. When we experience beauty in this life, it's like catching a glimpse of this holy reality as though through a small keyhole, and it changes us, which in turn changes the world. In 1924, the New York Philharmonic was playing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony on the radio, and by the miracles of technology of the time, blind and deaf Helen Keller was able to, if not hear it, feel it. And through that feeling, caught a glimpse of its true glory. It was such an amazing experience for her to feel that work of art that she wrote a letter to the symphony. And in this letter, Helen Keller described the ecstasy of feeling the music. Last night, she wrote, when the family was listening to your wonderful rendering of the Immortal Symphony, someone suggested that I put my hand on the receiver and see if I could get any of the vibrations. He unscrewed the cap, and I lightly touched the sensitive diaphragm. What was my amazement to discover is that I could feel not only the vibrations, but also the impassioned rhythm, the throb and the urge of the music. The intertwined and intermingling vibrations from different instruments enchanted me. When the human voice leaped up, trilling from the surge of harmony, I recognized them instantly as voices. I felt the chorus grow more exultant, more ecstatic, upcurving swift and flame-like until my heart almost stood still. These ecstatic words of Helen Keller remind me that when we dare to touch beauty, to really feel it, we, limited as we are, can touch the very vibrations of heaven. Heaven is that holy reality of intense harmony where sadness and injustice and incompleteness are transformed in the depths of God. That small slice of heaven that we experience then returns to the world, transforming us and everything in our path. We become open to, to the resurrection possibilities of creative harmony to heal and restore our planet and our humanity. Remember, too, that the Ninth Symphony, with its Ode to Joy choral movement, was written by a very deaf Beethoven, who lived in a very troubled time. Napoleon had just ravaged Europe with his lust for power, and things were falling apart all around him. Beethoven was deaf and alone and cynical about the world, but he found refuge in music, even music in his head that he couldn't physically hear. And he found refuge in poetry, at least in Schiller's poem, Ode to Joy, which he set to music. And so he changed hearts all over the world with this symphony and continues to do so wherever it is performed. So then, beauty helps us catch this glimpse of heaven and a taste of what can be in this world. Helen Keller got a glimpse of heaven, just as Beethoven and Schiller did. Whenever we immerse ourselves in beauty, we find within us a new power and passion to bring heaven to earth. So during this Lenten season, my hope for you is that during these troubled times, and you will just take some beauty breaks. Go out and bathe yourself in beauty in whatever way you can. Music, art, nature, the mystics and poets, so that you might feel those heavenly vibrations that reveal God's transforming, loving presence in this world. We might then catch a glimpse of what Julian of Norwich meant when she wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. For there is a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go." And that concludes my presentation. So as we think about all this, I want to ask you, what forms of beauty do you find most important in your spiritual life and for your spiritual well-being? And then how can we include more beauty in our lives and maybe even in our worship services? I'm going to turn it over to you now. And if you can unmute and perhaps share some of your thoughts, or you may want to talk about something entirely different related to beauty. But I am interested to know what forms of beauty mean so much to you. You can probably guess that through this presentation that music is one of my greatest forms of beauty. But what about you? I know Paul just gave, Paul, I actually used you in a sermon because I loved your idea of waking up early before sunrise, and you and your wife sharing a cup of coffee and watching the sunrise. I thought that was really beautiful. So tell us a little bit more about that.
That's my dog's insistence. She gets up at 5 a.m. trying to rouse us. We have no choice, but she's right there with us, and I find great beauty with animals. I can just ponder, their beautiful form and all senses, touch, with their fur, and they seem to get it, what many humans seem to have lost.
Amen to that. What kind of a dog do you have?
It's a shelter dog, kind of part Pomeranian, which keeps her small and cute, but she's part Australian Shepherd, which keeps her on the go. So.
Oh, it's beautiful. So it's really a very I love that animals and nature combined. It's beautiful.
Yeah, she's right behind me too.
Oh, what's her name?
Liza.
Hi, Liza. And what about some of the rest of you? Can you relate to that or to some other forms of beauty? Don't be afraid to unmute.
Well, I will go.
Okay.
I know you can't see me talking, but just, I have that picture of that waterfall on this screen.
Beautiful.
Because that's where I experienced beauty. That was in South Carolina on a trip that we took in 22. And there's just something about rocks and flowing water that really strikes me as being a thing of beauty. The other part of beauty of my life are my grandchildren. Just watching them grow and develop, and the things that they become interested in, and the energy that they exude that wears me out, but I love being around it. And there isn't anything they can do that doesn't strike beauty for me.
It's wonderful. I love that picture too of the waterfall. There are so many places in Missouri. Missouri is one of the most beautiful places ever. I mean, really, when you get out and look at it, it is a beautiful state. We have so much around us. We are so blessed. And I know that was in North Carolina or one of the Carolinas, but we can find similar things right here around us. Yeah. Anyone else?
I would say I love in the spring. I love the beauty of the flowers as they come up. With that last slide that you had, that to me that was so beautiful. But then in the fall, I love to see the trees turning. And
Yes.
I don't feel they were very vibrant last year. But the thing is, in the past, it's just the beauty of the trees when they start to turn. So spring and the fall seasons.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we're getting, we've had such a mild winter and spring seems to be coming early. So maybe we'll see those flowers sooner rather than later, and we can enjoy that. And there's also a beauty to the starkness of winter too. I think we can find beauty in nature in all seasons, but I'm like you, when the flowers come out, my whole spirit just seems to feel happier. Yeah. That's wonderful.
Well, I'll share. I've seen this presentation last month and my other, but I still enjoyed it just as much this time.
Oh, good.
But I'll go back to what I said last time, was that to me, music's everything.
Yeah.
Because it is eclectic, it is generational, it is, everybody has it. Everybody has it, no matter what country you go to, no matter where you go, anywhere in this world, they have music of some form, of some kind. It could be only percussion is the only instruments they play, but they dance and they sing and they celebrate with it. They all have, everywhere you turn, there is something for somebody in it. And the thing is for me, I guess it comes from, I was in church choir all the way from grade school to high school. I was in band I played trombone for 10 years. I marched corps one summer. I've had to learn all the instruments while I was in college because that was part of my scholarship. I have an appreciation and a depth of music, and there is no genre, no style of music I won't listen to. I may not like everybody in it, but there's not one genre of music that I don't like something of. So to me, that's my art. Because it shows me all the pictures of beauty, all of nature, the good and the bad of people, the heartbreak, all that stuff. It lets you go through the whole emotional rainbow. So
Now, do you still play the trombone or play an
no,
instrument?
I can still play it if I want to, but not very well. My embouchure is not what it was.
I know. I understand.
But my
Yeah.
oldest son played it from 6th grade to 12th grade, and I would have to pick it up and show him how to play certain parts a little bit different or a little bit better. My embouchure is not as good, but I can still do it. So it's like, when you do it that long, the habits are there, the form's still there, everything, you just remember it. And most of the surprising is that I'm not a sight reader. I tell people from after my freshman year in high school, I never memorized a piece of music ever. I listened by ear. I just played along with everybody that else was with me, matched them. Or if I wanted to, I'd have fun and play the harmony from some other part. But yeah, so it was always interesting for me to read music with them because that was never my forte. So, and don't let me read treble clef because I always get confused.
But in music seems to be a main form of beauty in our worship services as well. And
yep.
I love it when we have musicians in the church I would rather hear them than any sermon,
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you? Okay. I was going to say music is really where I find beauty, and it's particularly now the music in the church, the new music in the church is now. A lot of people don't like it or appreciate it. They want to stick to the old, but I'm finding new messages in the songs really it makes so much sense to me. I mean, and I can see why young people would be drawn to it because it's kind of the language that we speak now, And so I love music, and I love the music that that we're receiving from the music that's presented to us in the church now. And Sunday is going to be a big part of the program. It's going to be this Marvel Jones is quite a musician, and so he will be presented. It'll be mainly like a mini concert is what it is.
Oh, wonderful.
That's because I love music. I told him though, you gotta play "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." So
Yeah.
you gotta play that. But I don't care what else you play, but you have to do that. But music is really, I love this new music that the people are singing now.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I shouldn't say this, but our new pastor asked, what pew do you have? What songbook do you have in your pews? And I said, well, I hate to tell you this, but we don't have any that we use because we use do that other thing, so I don't know what she's going to really think about that, but anyway, I love music. I love the messages it's sending today. I understand them and I can rejoice in them, and the music for me is Patricia is
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's why at my ceremony, I had Amazing Grace, which is my favorite hymn of all time.
Yeah.
But also I had Matthew West Do Something, because I love his message. And the video is awesome because they have different people showing signs. It's not up here I'm singing. It's just an eclectic thing of people putting signs up with words on it of what do something means and things like that. So I think
Who is that by again?
Matthew West. Yes. Yeah, look him up. His catalog of songs is absolutely phenomenal. And his story is absolutely great because he was good. He was going along well. He was being successful in the Christian music. And then all of a sudden his voice went and he got mad. He got upset and said, God, why are you doing this to me? I'm doing nothing but praising you and doing all this stuff. And you took my voice away. And then he realized that how stupid that was. And he reformed himself again and came back and became even more dynamic than he was.
That sounds kind of like Beethoven's story. Yeah.
That sometimes sometimes you wonder why you gave me this gift. I'm doing what you told me to, and why'd you take it away? So yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, how you doing? Oh, good.
Oh, I think she might be talking to somebody.
She's on a phone call.
Okay. What about some of the rest of you? What forms of beauty mean a lot to you, both in your personal life or in church, or what would you like to see? Or are there other forms of beauty that we could offer in church as well?
A memories come to me, and I'm not sure about what your presentation, Patricia, and thank you for it, has stirred it up. But a few years ago, I didn't have this experience of beauty myself, but I witnessed it. I watched over someone else's shoulder as he had it. It was an online acquaintance of mine, and he committed to a project. He had noticed on his morning commute that every day he passed 2 trees that had grown up together to the point that they were mature trees.
Uh-huh.
And they were more or less standing by themselves in an open space. I think perhaps it was a field. And the discipline he committed himself to was that every day for a year at about the same time of morning, he either went there or stopped on his commute, and he took a picture of those 2 trees from the same position, And then he posted that on his blog. It was just a visual blog.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Wow.
simple, but pleasant pictures. We could say beautiful pictures. But as they accumulated one after another, there was this record of both continuity and change
Mm,
that
mm.
was stunning and stimulating.
Wow, that is beautiful. And just, yes, I like the way you said that continuity and change. And isn't there something very beautiful about that balance of continuity and change as we see in nature and we can produce in our own lives? We can't get away from the change. We embrace it, but we also desire the continuity. And there's something beautiful in that. I love that. So it's not just the pictures of the trees, but the whole experiences of watching them grow. It's lovely. It's wonderful.
Bruce here. The full moon in February. It was an awesome experience because, you know, it was a Sunday morning, and we try to leave home at about 6:30, 7 o'clock to make our way up here to Bowling Green. And that particular morning, I had, as I traveled up 61, I had the full moon in front of me, but I had the rising sun in my rearview mirror. And so there came that point where I had both the full sun and the full moon
Yeah.
Oh,
in my sight. And it was, the only other time I experienced it was in the year after Hurricane Katrina. A group of us had gone down to New Orleans to do some rehab work and cleanup. And it was a Saturday evening, and we were crossing a part of Lake Pontchartrain, and we had the full moon rising on the left and the sun setting on the right. And that is just
wow.
an awesome thing to be able to experience.
It reminds me that, you know, that moment when you experience the sun and the moon together at that moment, it reminds me of what Rudolf Otto called numinosity. It was a moment of experiencing the holy, a numinous moment. And I think that's what you are describing there too, is that sort of numinous moment.
That was Ash Wednesday this year.
Oh,
That because I only reason to remember because my wife and I were traveling up to New Harmony for Ash Wednesday, so of course we're coming up in the late afternoon, and the moon was to my left, the sun was going down on the right, and it was just like the most amazing thing. So
you felt that too. It was on Ash Wednesday. What a beautiful symbolic moment. Oh, wow.
Luckily, I had my wife there, so she could take really good pictures and still while I'm driving. So.
Yeah. So you could be here to tell it. Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
I appreciated the reflections and discussion. I think it was on your presentation. I can't remember if it was Whitehead who said it, that something like beauty is the intersection of justice and truth and compassion.
Mm-hmm. No, isn't that you mentioned? Isn't that Richard Rohr?
Yeah, I just got through reading something from Richards, and he approved that too, of course. But you know, I see, of course, Richard is process, even though he doesn't claim it.
Right, he's very much a part of the process.
but yeah, it says if I just meditate, you know, that intersection or union of justice, truth,
Yes,
and compassion. That's
and those come together.
very multi-layers of beauty
Yes.
when you are in that mix. And I was recalling, something I heard from Becca Stevens, or read about what she says, who's the founder of Thistle Farms in Nashville. It's a rehabilitation community for women.
Uh-huh.
And she came up with the name as she was driving in an industrial part of Nashville. No beauty that you could see really at first
Yeah.
glance. You notice
Right.
all the thistles on the highway, and thistles are considered ugly, and they're prickly, they hurt you. And but one day she noticed that beautiful violet flower that comes from thistle when they're blooming, and then she attributed that to the women that society has discarded. And
Wow.
but they also have inner beauty and flowers. So now the women in that community make perfumes and paper out of thistles
Oh,
as they learn to reclaim their lives. What a perfect metaphor.
oh,
And
that is really moving. I love that.
and,
Who
yeah,
would think you take a thistle and find such beauty and such, and then into forms of creativity, which they're doing, which to
right,
help
yeah.
them.
So there's volunteers who harvest thistles for her and send them to the factory where they make that. But she learned that it's a folklore recipe from the hills in Tennessee on how they made oils and salve and lotion. And there are people, and I believe it too, that and you can purchase, thistlefarms.org, but you can purchase their salves, and there are healing properties that you just can't get from whatever you find at Walgreens or so forth, that because love is built into that.
Right. Oh, gosh, that sounds wonderful. Yes, there's so much beauty that we can create in the midst of the worst of circumstances. And when we do, wow, I think all of heaven celebrates. And it sounds like that's what these women have done. Wow, it's wonderful. It's a beautiful example. What about some of the rest of you? Any other things that come to mind, or things that you would like to do? Maybe you feel during Lent is a very busy time, as Darren expressed. It really can be a stressful time for ministers if we let it become that way. So it's crucial that we take time, even during Lent, even the smallest amount of time, just a short break to take in some form of beauty. Even if it's, and meditation can be beautiful too, just in itself is a form of beauty, because meditation holds everything gently without pushing away. And, you hold everything gently. And that is a form of beauty, just taking time to meditate or do yoga or whatever you do. It's important. Or delving into your favorite text, like Richard Rohr, maybe. I love him too. Go ahead.
That's why I'm preaching on Romans this week instead of John.
Oh, really?
In the lectionary, that Romans it talks about God gives you tribulation. And he does all these things because he knows that will strengthen you and grow you. And so I go, that's so fitting for this time, because last week I told people, I said it was funny because I had to get my Sunday, even though John 3:16, I still had to put that together for Sunday. And then I also had to do my final paper in that class, and it was a 4-part sermon, 4 Sunday sermons on a part of pastoral care, which I picked grief. And I had to find 4 examples in the Bible that dealt with those things. And so by the time Saturday, I was sitting there going, okay, what was I preaching on Sunday? So had to remind me which sermon I was supposed to be doing.
I know what you mean.
So, but then I reminded myself that, you know, so when I saw that come up, I was reading one, but I got to Romans, I said, okay, God's talking to me. He's like, it's through our tribulations that we grow, and we grow closer to God and all that. So there's beauty in the pain sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the tragedy, there is great beauty. For example, I'll just give you a simple example. Earlier this year, the gentleman that does the music, and he and I work together on what our music's going to be every Sunday. His wife had a massive stroke and then passed away a few days later. And
Goodness.
in that tragedy, people gave up all together to her memorial fund was $5,100. They a couple of weeks ago, we did a bingo night at the fairgrounds in Bowling Green to supply our well fund to finish up the money we were collecting for the well fund, and we had another $4,000 or $5,000 to go. And they sold tickets, they did bingo, they did an auction, they sold food, everything. And I walked away going, man, we probably got about $7,000 or $8,000 in this thing. No, we collected $14,300. And that small, and you all know how small those communities are.
Wow.
And they came from everywhere. We had over 300 people in that place, and it was amazing. And part of it was is that they decided to dedicate part of that to her in her name as well, because she was such an integral part of that mission. And so that her death was tragic. It was horrible. And it was sudden. It was not anything anybody expected in their 60s even. But out of that, this wonderful outpouring of love and this graciousness and all this is that, yeah, we went through this tribulation, and her husband still is, God bless him. But there was just such amazingness, such beauty in people that it turned out.
Yeah, I like that idea of beauty as kindness. That ties into that sort of moral beauty of kindness and justice. And I'm going to be preaching on the woman at the well, another example of the beauty of being seen and being understood and being accepted. And
I almost did that. I know that's the other one, and I almost did it. But
well, I know it must have been hard for you.
No, I was like, but I know I had it. I kind of had an idea what I was going to do, and I just decided, well, I'll look at the others to see if maybe I can tie some of that in. But I hit Romans 5 and went, no,
that's for you. That
was for me. I'm getting that, but no, I love the woman, even though it's long. That's a lot of time.
Oh, I know. It's the passage is like a whole chapter.
Yeah, but no, the beauty in all of it, the innocence of it all, that no one is unforgiven, no one is lesser than, no one is without redemption, no one is beyond.
All are equal in dignity. Yeah, it's amazing.
So I'll have to look you up. Now your church, you do broadcast?
Well, lately we've been doing Zoom. He's recording our Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be recorded. Sure, you can.
Will it be on your Facebook page?
Yeah, it will be. Actually.
Okay.
Are yours recorded?
That mine's not, but they have. But that's part of my great thing about having an hour and a half to drive home with. Is I listen to Community Christians sermons on Sunday, and I listen to First Christian on Sunday
That's
on the way home.
wonderful. You get your
So,
fill.
Yeah, because I'm always learning. See,
That's wonderful.
and I love when people talk, ministers talk on the same passage I did, and go, I love
Yeah.
to see how they brought it out, and so
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
so.
Well, our recording is about an hour. I don't want to cut off prematurely if people have things and want to contribute. This is such a rich offering, and including the conversation we're having after Patricia's wonderful presentation. So does any have any final thoughts? Then I'll stop the recording and we can still chit chat too and finish up our cluster business, if you will. So. All right. Well, thank you so much, Patricia. And
Well, thank
I
you.
mentioned Pastor Millersburg Christian Church, and we'll certainly check her out. And just thank you for contributing again for us, and thank you everybody for joining us and adding to this great beauty.
Well, you enriched me very much, so thank you. I loved hearing from all of you and meeting you.
Well, thank you. So.